Now it's time for 3x3 Experiment by JCD, comparing stories from ABC, CBS, and NBC. The never-ending 3x3
invasion. The president clarifying comments he made at his news conference that critics say opened the door for Russia to invade.
There's a lot of news to cover tonight. The rising tensions with Russia as President Biden is forced to clean up his comments about an invasion into Ukraine.
And my one-on-one with his chief of staff.
Plus our visit to the White House to speak with President Biden's chief of staff.
So tonight, the January 6th panel asking Ivanka
Trump
to cooperate and how the investigation into former President Trump's alleged election interference in Georgia is heating up.
Arctic blast, frigid temperatures, snow, and freezing rain expected from Texas to Virginia. Are you one of the millions of Americans preparing for the bitter winter weather? COVID vaccine for young kids. The news tonight from Dr. Fauci about when...
New developments in our investigation into a pop-up COVID testing company, growing allegations of mishandled samples and inaccurate results. Now another state taking action.
Children under 5 might be able to get a shot.
Our NBC News exclusive, our cameras are there as a group of YouTube scuba divers make a discovery police missed. Will it crack a 4-year-old cold case of a missing mother?
The Great Outdoors, the program helping America's children and their mental health.
Problems for Peloton, why it's temporarily halting production of its iconic bikes.
And a really great story tonight, honoring America's greatest generation with a new tribute to the Tuskegee Airmen.
And a scary moment on live TV, a reporter hit by a car, then getting up to finish her report, her first interview since it happened.
Do you think if any other president's done as much in 1 year?
But after that news conference, the White House on defense. Today, President Biden tried to clarify his comments.
Early today, reading from a prepared statement, the president tried to clarify what he meant.
Assembled Russian units move across the Ukrainian border. That is an invasion.
President Biden started his second year in office today with a clarification after suggesting yesterday that he might let a small attack on Ukraine slide.
It's one thing if it's a minor incursion and then we end up having a fight about what to do and not do, etc.
On what punishment Russia would face if it invaded Ukraine. But on Wednesday, the president triggered alarm bells in Europe, suggesting the U.S. and NATO response would be determined by the size of a Russian invasion. That earned a rare rebuke from Ukraine's president, tweeting, "There are no minor incursions, just as there are no minor casualties."
Meeting with U.S. allies in Germany ahead of a critical sit-down with the Russians, Secretary of State Blinken tried to reassure America's partners.
If any Russian military forces move across the Ukrainian border and commit new acts of aggression against Ukraine, that will be met with a swift, severe, united response from the United States and our allies and partners.
Secretary Blinken.
It's bigger than a conflict between two countries. It's bigger than Russia and NATO.
With new satellite images showing the roughly 100,000 Russian troops massed on Ukraine's border, in Berlin today, the Secretary of State promised a swift, severe response if Russia invades.
It may seem like a distant regional dispute or yet another example of Russian bullying. But at stake, again, are principles that have made the world safer.
Russia claims it's threatened by aggression from the West, and it's demanding security guarantees to defuse this crisis, including a ban on Ukraine joining NATO. That's something the U.S. says it will never agree to.
Now to our NBC News investigation and serious new allegations, including fraud and misinformation, being made against that pop-up COVID testing company we've been reporting on. Ann Thompson now with the latest.
The pop-up testing operation Center for COVID Control, a familiar sight in 29 states, tonight facing a pileup of legal troubles. Colorado now joining Illinois and Oregon in investigating the business.
They're misleading people, they're endangering people, and they're undermining our response to the pandemic.
There is new evidence tonight suggesting the Omicron variant was here in the U.S. before the world knew it existed, days before it was announced it had been found in South Africa. And now new signs tonight that the Omicron surge is slowing across parts of the country, the east, where it was the epicenter at the beginning, and what they're seeing now. But authorities say hospitalizations still at a record high, and deaths, which always lag behind new case numbers, still at about 1,700 deaths a day. Nearly all of the deaths, health officials say, among those patients who are unvaccinated. Here's ABC's Stephanie Ramos on how long Omicron has been here and how they figured this out.
Tonight, new evidence suggests Omicron was in this country before the world learned of the new variant. A CDC study found traces of Omicron in New York City wastewater on November 21st, 4 days before the variant was announced by South African scientists and 10 days before the first U.S. case was reported.
By sampling in wastewater, you can detect virus in huge populations. If we can identify a variant faster, we can respond more quickly and make sure that we reduce transmission in the community.
Minnesota is suing the center and its lab, Doctors Clinical Laboratory, accusing them of giving test results with inaccurate and false information.
The problem is fraud. The problem is misinformation. The problem is no information.
Sheila Berry was so suspicious of the Philadelphia site she went to, she took pictures.
So did you administer the test yourself?
Yes.
And then once you did the test, did they write your name down on the test tube?
No.
Infections in New York City have dropped 46% in the last week, but the city still has the nation's highest death rate because deaths and hospitalizations always lag behind cases.
I do think we are past the peak of the Omicron surge, but just because we're past the peak does not mean we're done. We have several weeks to go before the infection numbers really get low.
1,700 Americans with COVID are still dying every day, the vast majority unvaccinated, like Angeline Saucedo, a 34-year-old mother of 4 in Oklahoma. Her mother says Angeline didn't know she had diabetes when she was hospitalized with COVID.
By day 3 of going to the ER for 3 days, my daughter was gone.
The family had put off getting the vaccine, but Angeline's death has pushed them to get the shot.
You're scared to get vaccinated, so am I. You know, I still haven't got vaccinated, but just...
In a scathing report, federal inspectors found a laundry list of problems with the Illinois-based operation, including tests read too late and tests with no patient names. Still, the center's lab billed the federal government for more than $122 million. And in November, the center's CEO bought this $1.3 million house. The company, which temporarily paused its operations last week, says we are working closely with authorities to provide information and shed light on the operational challenges CCC experienced at the height of the Omicron surge. Challenges that consumers say left them without the results needed to protect themselves. Ann Thompson, NBC News.
Tonight, New Jersey's governor is warning healthcare workers they could lose their jobs if they are not vaccinated and boosted.
We are no longer going to look past those who continue to put their colleagues and perhaps, I think even more importantly, those who are their responsibility in danger of COVID. That has to stop.
Across this country, hospitals are struggling to care for 160,000 people with COVID. Nurses inside this Pennsylvania hospital say they are drowning in patients.
We're seeing 20, 30, 40-year-olds that are ending up very sick and dying, and they don't have the conditions that some of these older people have.
Stephanie with us now tonight, and there's new research at this hour looking at, I know, patients who were given the vaccine, those who thought they were getting the vaccine, and those who actually got a placebo instead. And this was meant to study potential side effects.
Exactly, David. So researchers looked at 12 vaccine safety trials with thousands of people and found that 2/3 of volunteers who got the placebo reported things like a headache and fatigue, suggesting that those relatively mild side effects widely reported from the COVID vaccine might not be as common as people may expect. David.
Stephanie Ramos with us tonight. Stephanie, thank you.
Also this evening, for the first time, the committee investigating the attack on the U.S. Capitol is requesting testimony from a member of the Trump family. Garrett Hake now with that story.
Tonight, the January 6th committee formally requesting testimony from Ivanka
to the FBI. How many FBI agents or confidential informants actively participated in the events of January 6th?
Sir, I'm sure you can appreciate that I can't go into the specifics of sources and methods.
Trump to cooperate with their investigation. In an 11-page letter, the committee outlining their questions for the former president's daughter. about the former president's actions or inaction, they say, before, during, and after the attack on the Capitol. In particular, they want to know more about a conversation the former president had with the vice president, Mike Pence, on the phone. Ivanka Trump was right there in the Oval Office when it took place. Here's our chief Washington correspondent, Jonathan Karl.
Did any FBI agents or confidential informants actively participate in the events of January 6th? Yes or no?
Sir, I can't answer that.
The January 6th committee is asking to speak to former President Trump's daughter and top advisor Ivanka Trump. Seen here backstage at the rally outside the White House shortly before the attack on the Capitol. In his speech at that rally, Trump repeatedly called on Vice President Pence to use his position presiding over the counting of electoral votes to overturn the election.
And I hope Mike is going to do the right thing. I hope so.
The committee says Ivanka Trump was in the Oval Office that morning when her father had a heated phone conversation with Pence. I spoke to Trump about that call for my book, Betrayal.
There was a report, and excuse my language, not mine, it was in the report, that you talked to him that morning and you said you could be a patriot or you can be a Did you really say that, or is that a incorrect?
I wouldn't dispute it.
Really?
I wouldn't dispute it.
Did any FBI agents or confidential informants commit crimes of violence on January 6th?
I can't answer that, sir.
Also in the room at that time, Trump loyalist retired General Keith Kellogg, who told the committee Ivanka Trump turned to him and said, quote, "Mike Pence is a good man."
Did any FBI agents or FBI informants actively encourage and incite crimes of violence on January 6th?
Sir, I can't answer that.
Kellogg testified that when Trump supporters attacked the Capitol, Ivanka Trump repeatedly urged her father to speak out.
We have firsthand testimony.
Ms. Sadburn, who is Ray Epps?
I'm aware of the individual, sir. I don't have the specific background to him.
That his daughter Ivanka went in at least twice to ask him to please stop this violence.
Today, a spokesperson for Ivanka Trump declined to say whether she would testify, instead referring to a portion of a tweet she posted on January 6th during the riot, saying, quote, "Any security breach or disrespect to our law enforcement is unacceptable. The violence must stop immediately. Please be peaceful." What her spokesperson didn't mention is that in that same tweet, Ivanka Trump addressed the rioters as, quote, "American patriot."
Well, there are a lot of people who are understandably very concerned about Mr. Epps. On the night of January 5th, 2021, Epps wandered around the crowd that had gathered, and there's video out there of him chanting, "Tomorrow, we need to get into the Capitol, into the Capitol." This was strange behavior, so strange that the crowd began chanting, "Fed, Fed, 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 Fed." Ms. Sandburn, was Ray Epps a Fed?
Sir, I cannot answer that question.
We have testimony from other witnesses that Ms. Trump was sent in to persuade her father to issue a statement to try and call off the riot. We'd like to know more about that.
We vote on whether to
The committee has information the former president recorded outtakes of his January 6th video message to rioters in which he did not ask them to leave.
But go home and go home in peace.
Shortly thereafter, the FBI put out a public post seeking information on individuals connected with violent crimes on January 6th. Among those individuals, in the bottom there, is Mr. Epps. The FBI publicly asked for information, offering cash rewards leading to information leading to the arrest. This was posted, and then, sometime later, magically, Mr. Epps disappeared from the public posting. According to public records, Mr. Epps has not been charged with anything. No one's explained why a person videoed urging people to go to the Capitol, a person whose conduct was so suspect the crowd believed he was a Fed, would magically disappear from the list of people the FBI was looking at. Ms. Sandburn, a lot of Americans are concerned that the federal government deliberately encouraged illegal and violent conduct on January 6th. My question to you, and this is not an ordinary law enforcement question, this is a question of public accountability. Did federal agents or those in service of federal agent actively encourage violent and criminal conduct on January 6th?
Not to my knowledge, sir.
Thank you.
A spokesperson for Ivanka Trump did not address that claim or whether she would comply, writing, as she publicly stated that day at 3:15 p.m., any security breach or disrespect to our law enforcement is unacceptable. New text messages released from January 7th show Fox News host Sean Hannity giving White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany tips for the president. No more stolen election talk. No more crazy people. Yes, 100%, she responds. Also today, more potential trouble for the former president. A prosecutor in Atlanta has requested a special grand jury to investigate whether Mr. Trump tried to overturn the 2020 election results in Georgia. Nora?
Scott McFarland, thank you.
The next day, on January 6th, Mr. Epps is seen whispering to a person, and 5 seconds later, 5 seconds after he's whispering to a person, that same person begins to forcibly tear down the barricades. Did Mr. Epps urge them to tear down the barricades?
Sir, similar to the other answers, I cannot answer that.
Up next, they were crucial to President Biden's election. A report card from black voters in South Carolina.
We already have a nigger mayor. We don't need any more big shots.
Back now with President Biden's challenges as he begins his second year in office, among them falling support among black voters who lifted his once struggling campaign. Our Kristen Welker traveling to South Carolina to ask, has the president kept his promises?
It was the state that saved Joe Biden's presidential campaign.
Thank you, South Carolina!
South Carolina's black Democratic voters turning out in force to help him win the primary and ultimately the White House. 1 year later, we went back to see what those voters are thinking now.
Young black entrepreneurs are just as capable of succeeding given the chance as white entrepreneurs are. But they don't have lawyers, they don't have accountants, but they have great ideas.
Now, Helen Bradley, one of President Biden's most fervent supporters, telling us she is disappointed. Do you think that President Biden has fought hard enough for the priorities of black voters?
I do not.
Bradley, a trustee at her church just outside of Columbia, says her top priority is Democrats' voting rights legislation, which was defeated this week. She blames President Biden for not pushing for it earlier.
We should challenge these students. We should challenge students in these schools to have advanced placement programs in these schools. We have this notion that somehow if you're poor, you cannot do it. Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids. Wealthy kids, black kids.
Our ancestors fought hard, long and hard, to get these rights for us, and for them to be taken away would be detrimental.
Bradley praises the president's handling of COVID, but not the economy.
When you go to the grocery stores, you find things 3 and 4 times higher than it used to be, but our paychecks are not 3 and 4 times higher.
Even call centers, which rushed overseas in the hundreds of thousands. How many times you get the call? I'd like to talk to you about your credit card.
Langston Brooks is also worried about soaring prices. What grade would you give President Biden?
I'm going to say a B- as of right now.
You are running in Democratic primaries against Southerners like Mark Warner and John Edwards.
Better than anybody else. And you don't know my state. My state was a slave state. My state is a border state. My state is the 8th largest black population in the country. My state is anything from a northeast liberal state.
Okay, so he has some room for improvement?
He does.
When Detroit found out they didn't have, when all the exodus, they didn't have people when the city got back on its feet who could literally turn on the street lights, run the water system. So we hired some folks to go into the neighborhoods. They picked 58 women, turns out, from the hood.
Fletcher Smith, a former state delegate and longtime Biden supporter, commended the president for passing a COVID relief bill. His advice now, more direct outreach.
We will continue to be with him, but he needs to be with us, walking side by side, not behind us, not necessarily in front of us, but side by side as Martin Luther King did.
You cannot go to a 7-Eleven or a Dunkin' Donuts unless you have a slight Indian accent. I'm not joking.
It's not just in South Carolina. Our NBC News poll shows black support for President Biden has dropped 19 points since April. Now it's down to 64%.
When you turn on the stations, sit on one station for 2 hours. 2 to 3 out of 5 have mixed race couples in them. That's not by accident. They're selling soap, man. Not a joke. Remember old Pat Caddell used to say, you want to know what's happening in American culture? Watch out.
What do you say to these black voters who say that you do not have their backs, as you promised on the campaign trail?
I've had their back my entire career. I've never not had their advertising.
If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black.
Longtime Biden ally, South Carolina Congressman James Clyburn urges patience.
He was elected to a 4-year term, and he's been in office for 1 year. I think it's a little bit, let's say, disrespectful to expect that everything that he laid out is going to be completed in the first year of your term.
Unlike the African American community, with notable exceptions, the Latino community is an incredibly diverse community.
So will these voters give the president more time?
I will never turn my back on Joe Biden.
He has to show me a little more, so I don't really want to commit to that at this point.
Every major crime bill that's come out of this Congress has had the name Joe Biden on that bill. We do everything but hang people for jaywalking.
The president needing to re-energize key supporters in a critical election year. Kristen Welker, NBC News, Columbia, South Carolina.
This bill.
He said in the first 100 days, he's going to let the big banks once again write their own rules. Unchain Wall Street. They're going to put you all back in chains. The blinders have been taken off. They've all of a sudden seen a hell of a lot clearer. They're seeing, geez, the reason I was able to stay sequestered in my home is because some black woman was able to stack the grocery shelf.
African American, who is articulate and bright and clean and a nice looking guy. I mean, that's a storybook, man.
Somalis have made my city of Wilmington, Delaware, on a smaller scale. It's a large, very identifiable Somali community. I might add, if you ever come to the train station with me, you'll notice that I have great relationships with them because there's an awful lot of driving cabs.
There are also new developments tonight in the 5G rollout here in the U.S. Amid that concern, the new cell phone signal could interfere with airplanes. Tonight at some airports, the FAA now issuing new approvals for planes to land in low visibility conditions using the current technology on those planes.
And that is and I hoped it would go away. I hope we didn't have to talk about it, but no, it's on. It's the 5G telecommunications companies versus the airlines.
Tonight, this is your story.
That's what I'm saying. It's my story. What?
Well, because I was waiting for you to discuss it.
Here's my story with the clip.
Tonight, crisis averted. AT&T and Verizon agreeing to temporarily limit the number of towers around airports that will carry their high-speed 5G signals. The unexpected move coming just a day after major U.S. airlines warned that there could be a, quote, catastrophic disruption to air travel if 5G rolled out near major airports. Here's the worry. That stronger 5G signal is very similar to the frequency of a plane's radio altimeter, a device pilots use to judge their distance from the ground. Airlines say in poor weather conditions, when visibility is low, pilots might not have reliable information to land safely, potentially leading to thousands of diverted and flights. And not just for passengers, too.
The FAA cannot tell us if there is a problem. The airlines are erring on the side of safety to make sure that they scientifically determine that there isn't a problem and that the flying public stays particularly safe.
The wireless carriers have long said 5G would not interfere with aircraft electronics. AT&T saying in a statement, "We are frustrated by the FAA's inability to do what nearly 40 countries have done, which is to safely deploy 5G technology without disrupting aviation services." The FAA says other countries have created permanent buffer zones, keeping the signal away from airports. But the signal in the U.S. would be more than twice as strong as those used in Europe.
Blah, blah, blah. There's so much misinformation about this story, and no one has seen the obvious. Couple of things. is a technical story to it, and then there's what's really going on. And that is that in the past 24 months, there was no money really to invest in upgrading altimeters, certainly not the millimeter wave altimeters. People think it's some kind of LiDAR that's shooting light down. No. This is a radar device that works from about 2,500 feet down to the ground, and it uses radio frequency, and the frequency is separated by a little bit of spectrum from the 5G that Verizon and AT&T are rolling out. This has been known for a long time. The spectrum was sold off. It was $80 billion. Somebody got happy. I don't know who gets to keep that money. And aviation had a long time to change this. Why didn't they do it? Very expensive. And the main manufacturer who has problems is Boeing. And that is because they have a different fuselage. They're not made of carbon fiber. They're made of sheet metal and rivets. And so the signature that is sent down, it can get a lot of distortion. Also, most of the Boeing aircraft have a two-dimensional, so two transmitters and receivers, and not the three, which is what is going to be required, which gives you a much better resolution. This is used for one thing only, really. When the airport is socked in, these aircraft can land automatically. And from about 250 feet down is where this thing is doing all the work, and it then has control over the FADEC, the engine control, everything. It will land the aircraft. So it's only needed in specific instances, although pilots have gotten a lot of responsibility taken away from them. It's been moving slowly towards what everyone knows is the next gen, where you don't need pilots at all. The interference can, I think, 100% be solved by a proper radio, which could cost easily $50,000 to put in and to purchase and to put in, but it could cost up to $1 million per aircraft to get it into compliance. And so this is between the FCC and the FAA, and the FAA put out airworthy directives for several Boeing aircraft, which then the international carriers took immediate advantage of, and it went like this. Do we have a Boeing somewhere? Because that's the one we're not going to fly empty to America. And that's because, well, we had to cancel it because, it's all unsafe over there. Look at who's canceling. They're canceling empty flights. They can't do it quick enough. In reality, there's probably very little danger in this specific instance, because all of that, all the measurements, everything has been done. In practice, we have a much larger problem as I looked into this millimeter wave radar system, because that is what 5G is going to be used for. You can measure distances very precisely. We've got 5G signals coming down from satellites. We are being inundated with this stuff. Not good at all. And I think it's going to interfere with everything. The major problem will be for autonomous driving. They're going to have a lot of problems with interference. And it just comes down to what crap are you putting in the car, Elon? So this is a money story. It's not really a safety story. But in long term, as I delved into the use of this millimeter wave radar in these bands, it could be a very big problem in general. Shit could get confused all the time, particularly self-driving cars.
Members of the all-black Tuskegee Airmen are some of the most highly decorated military pilots in our nation's history. But there was one honor that was overlooked for more than 70 years, until now. CBS's David Martin has the story.
It was the first Top Gun contest, held in 1949, a gunnery competition among pilots from across the Air Force, won by a team from the famed all-black Tuskegee Airmen, even though the record book listed the winner as unknown.
They knew who won, but they just didn't want to recognize us.
Retired Lieutenant Colonel James Harvey is 98 years old, but it's easy to still see the fighter pilot who was part of that winning team. Here he is with the trophy.
What happened to the trophy?
Well, it mysteriously got lost.
Until 2005, when a historian found it in storage at an Air Force museum.
She says, why isn't this on display? And the guy said, we can't display everything, but this item will never be on display.
It's on display now, and last week a plaque commemorating the first Top Guns was unveiled at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada, where that original competition was held.
What does it mean to you?
It means an awful lot. We proved that we were the best. Okay, let's show it.
Nearly 73 years later, mission accomplished.
It's been a life mission.
David Martin, CBS News, the Pentagon.
I got the chills watching that story. I'm so glad they're getting the recognition they deserve. We'll be right back.
Trouble tonight at Peloton. The company has stopped production of its bikes and treadmills for now after a pandemic boom. Peloton says it misjudged demand for its exercise equipment. Our Jake Ward now has more.
What's up, Peloton?
Tonight, Peloton's stock plunging to a 52-week low after reports that the company will temporarily stop making its bike and treadmill products. According to an internal document obtained by CNBC, the company misjudged how many people would buy its products and is sitting on more inventory than it needs. At the same time, Americans are returning to gyms and seeing similar products enter the market.
In a confidential presentation, the company said demand for its equipment has taken a significant drop due to price sensitivity and increasing competition.
This following a report citing SEC filings that company executives and insiders sold some of nearly $500 million in stock in a pre-scheduled selling program before the share price fell more than 80% from last year's high.
Celebrate yourself.
And the company has had to ride out public image problems, including a safety recall of its treadmill.
Peloton, come on.
During the pandemic, Peloton saw huge demand for its products and subscriptions, even announcing it would put $400 million into a new factory in the U.S. In a statement, Peloton's CEO said in part, "We are resetting our production levels for sustainable growth." Meanwhile, owners of expensive equipment that requires a monthly fee and constant connection are left in limbo, wondering about their next workout. Jake Ward, NBC News.
A 19-year-old pilot is inspiring a new generation of women to fly. Zara Rutherford set a world record today as the youngest woman to fly solo around the world. Her 5-month, 32,000-mile trip took longer than expected because of weather, visa, and equipment issues. She says if you don't try and see how high you can fly, then you'll never know. That's pretty impressive.
Now to our NBC News exclusive, the search for a missing mother. Our cameras were there when a group of YouTube scuba divers made a discovery police missed that could crack a 4-year-old cold case. Antonia Hilton with more now from Texas.
For 4 years, Jonathan and Bianca Torres agonized over the disappearance of their mother in Waco, Texas. Her disappearance, a short-lived news story.
A Waco woman disappears, leaving her family with nothing but questions.
By 2019, Waco police had suspended their investigation.
The investigator had overturned every stone that they could. They chased down every avenue of trying to piece together some kind of evidence.
Help came ultimately not from law enforcement, but a group of citizen cold case sleuths. YouTubers and scuba divers called Adventures with Purpose, who travel the country helping desperate families.
More often than not, they say, you have done more for us in one day than anybody has done combined for us in the last, X number of, months, days, years.
News of the find brought law enforcement to the scene.
They found this car within an hour. Why didn't police find it 4 years ago?
Unfortunately, after reviewing the reports, the original investigating detective did not find any information that led them to believe that she was in a body of water or in this location at all.
That door area right there. So
by late in the day, the car was on land. Police confirmed it was indeed Stephanie Torres' vehicle. And there was more that Jared Lysick had to tell the family.
So we do have confirmation that there are human remains inside of the vehicle.
Finally tonight, as journalists, we never want to be part of the story, but a colleague at our NBC affiliate in Huntington, West Virginia wasn't given much of a choice. Kristen Dahlgren with the amazing grace she showed on live television after the unthinkable happened.
Tori Yorgi was just about to start a live report on havoc caused by the icy weather. when she became the story.
Okay, I just got hit by a car, but I'm okay, Tim.
Her first instinct.
But this is live TV and everything's okay.
To reassure everyone, including the woman who hit her, that she was all right.
I'm okay.
I saw her face, the woman that was driving the car. She was mortified. So I felt really compelled to let her know I am good.
It's all good. I actually got hit by a car in college too, just like that.
Today, Yorkie says she's a little sore and surprised by how quickly her story went viral.
I really didn't think it would get that big.
The 25-year-old is about to start a new job at a bigger station.
Hopefully people don't look at me and say, oh, that's the reporter that got hit by the car. I hope they look at me and, are like, oh, okay, she's Tori. She's going to go out and tell us impacting stories.
She has already shown she's unflappable, adjusting the camera to continue her report. And tonight she is back at work, though the accident and driver are still on her mind.
Hopefully her car's okay.
A young reporter unfazed by internet fame. Kristen Dahlgren, NBC News.